There is a moment in life when you quietly realize that the person you have been performing is not the person you truly are. It does not arrive as a loud revelation, but as a subtle discomfort. You listen to your own voice in a conversation and feel slightly disconnected from it, as if you are watching a character rather than inhabiting yourself. You say yes when something inside you meant no. You laugh when you feel nothing. You are praised for qualities that feel more like armor than truth. And underneath all of that, there's a quiet thought you rarely admit to anyone. This isn't really me. The truth is uncomfortable, but simple. Much of who you think you are is a construction, a false identity your mind built to protect you, to keep you accepted, to keep you safe. It is not fake in the sense of being dishonest. It is fake in the sense of being incomplete. It is the version of you that was allowed to exist inside the environments you grew up in. As a child, you did not have the power to change the world around you, so your mind did something far more strategic. It changed you. It studied which parts of you were rewarded and which parts were rejected. It noticed when you were too emotional, too intense, too needy, too quiet, too curious. It measured the distance between who you naturally were and who people seemed to want you to be. And to close that gap, your mind began to edit you. Piece by piece, it pushed some traits forward and hid others in the background. You became more agreeable, more efficient, more responsible, more invisible, more entertaining, more useful, whatever reduced conflict and increased acceptance. Over time, this performance stopped feeling like a performance. It became automatic. The mask fused with your sense of self. You started to say things like, "I'm just like this," even when this felt heavy. You became the reliable one, the strong one, the one who doesn't complain, the one who fixes everything, the one who never needs help. Or the opposite, the quiet one, the distant one, the one who does not expect much from life. Not because that is who you truly are, but because that is who you learned it was safe to be. The problem is that your nervous system does not distinguish between adaptation and authenticity. If you play a role for long enough, your body organizes itself around that role. Your habits, relationships, goals, and even your posture begin to reflect the identity your mind decided was safest. And yet, something in you resists. A subtle fatigue, a sense of being miscast in your own life, a longing you cannot name. That longing is not a flaw. It is a signal. It is the part of you that remembers who you were before you became who you needed to be. If the person you became is not fully who you are, the question becomes, how did your mind build this false identity? And why does it feel so real? Your brain is not obsessed with authenticity. It is obsessed with survival. From the beginning, it scanned your environment, asking one silent question: who do I need to be in order to stay safe, loved, and connected? Every reaction you received became data. When you were praised for being quiet, you learned to mute yourself. When you were scolded for being emotional, you learned to numb. When you were admired for being productive, you learned to equate exhaustion with worth. Your authentic self did not disappear. It was simply reorganized according to what hurt less. Slowly, your mind created an internal template, a picture of the acceptable you. This template included how much space you were allowed to take, how much joy was safe to show, how much need you were allowed to express, and how much truth you were allowed to speak. Anything that fell outside that template felt dangerous. Not morally wrong, neurologically unsafe. So your mind built protections. You learned to anticipate other people's reactions before you acted. You rehearsed conversations in your head, editing your words in advance. You replayed past conflicts to calculate what version of you caused the least disruption. This constant forecasting was not overthinking. It was identity management. Every prediction was another brick in the false self. And because the brain loves efficiency, it began to automate this process. You stopped asking, "What do I want?" and started asking, "What will keep things stable?" You stopped feeling into your body and started reading the room. You stopped making choices from desire and started making them from obligation, fear, or habit. The false identity became a shortcut, the fastest way to avoid rejection, conflict, or abandonment. Over time, this adapted self attracted a certain kind of life, certain relationships, certain dynamics, certain responsibilities. People around you became attached to that version of you, the helpful one, the strong one, the calm one, the one who never says no. And this created another layer of pressure. If you change, you might disappoint them. If you grow, you might no longer fit inside the role they placed you in. Your subconscious takes note of that as well. It quietly adds a new clause to the contract. If I become more myself, I will lose love. And so the false identity stays, not just because it once protected you, but because you fear who or what you might lose without it. And yet, beneath all this adaptation, your original self never actually died. It waits in the background, surfacing as flashes of clarity, sudden desire, quiet anger, or unexplained sadness. Those moments are not instability. They are signals from who you were before your mind decided safety mattered more than truth. Once you begin to see the false identity for what it is, a protective construction rather than your essence, another challenge appears: the fear of letting it go. The mind says it wants freedom, but the body remembers that every past attempt to be more authentic once carried some kind of cost. So even as you awaken to the idea that the person I became isn't who I am, you may feel resistance, confusion, or even grief. Grief appears because there is loss on both sides. On one hand, you are mourning the years you spent living as someone you were never meant to be, the relationships you maintain by abandoning yourself, the opportunities you declined because you felt too small, the versions of you that never had permission to exist. On the other hand, you are also grieving the imagined safety that the false identity gave you. Even if it kept you confined, it also kept you oriented. You knew your role, your script, your function. Letting go of that feels like standing in an open field without walls for the first time. Beautiful, but terrifying. This is why the mind often tries to negotiate with change. It whispers, "Maybe we don't have to change that much." It suggests you keep parts of the performance while only adjusting the details. Be a little more honest, but not fully. Rest a bit more, but still overfunction. Speak up, but only in places where rejection feels unlikely. These partial shifts can be useful, but they can also become another layer of the same game, pretending to choose yourself while still prioritizing safety above truth. To truly begin dissolving the false identity, you have to ask a different set of questions. Not, how do I stay who I am and suffer less? But, who was I before I became this version of myself? Not, how do I keep everyone comfortable? But, what parts of me have been exiled to keep everyone comfortable? Not, how do I fix myself? But, which parts of me were never the problem to begin with? As these questions deepen, you may notice a quiet rebellion rising inside you. You start feeling irritation where you once felt only compliance. You feel tired in places where you used to push through. You sense a boundary where before there was only accommodation. This does not mean you are becoming difficult. It means your true self is tired of living in the basement of your own life. The false identity begins to crack the moment you stop treating these signals as inconveniences and start treating them as information. They are not random mood swings. They are intelligence. They are your system saying, I cannot keep carrying this role without losing myself. And in that realization, a new possibility appears. Maybe the goal is not to become a better version of the false identity, but to slowly allow the real one to come back to the surface. If the person you became is not who you are, the process of coming home to yourself will not be a dramatic reinvention. It will be a gradual remembering, a slow release of everything you agreed to carry just to survive. The first step is recognition without violence. You do not need to hate the false identity or declare war on it. It was built by a younger you who truly believed, this is what I must become to be safe. That version of you deserves gratitude, not blame. It kept you functioning in places where your true self could not breathe. So instead of asking, how do I destroy this version of me? You can begin with a softer question. Where did I learn that I had to be this way? The second step is curiosity. Start noticing the micro moments where your real self tries to appear. The urge to say no when your mouth says yes. The desire to rest when your mind says, keep proving yourself. The impulse to be honest when you feel yourself reaching for a familiar script. These are invitations, doorways back to who you are beneath the performance. The third step is experiment. Freedom does not arrive fully formed. It is tested in small doses. You say no once and survive. You share one honest feeling and the world does not collapse. You ask for help and notice that support feels strange, but not deadly. You disappoint someone slightly and recognize that you can still exist without their complete approval. Each of these acts sends a new message to your nervous system. It is becoming safe to be more myself. The fourth step is reorganization. As you honor more of your truth, your life will begin to shift around it. Some relationships will deepen because they were always anchored in who you are, not in who you performed. Others may fade or resist your change because they depended on your self-abandonment to stay comfortable. You are not losing love. You are losing the situations that required you to lose yourself. Finally, there's commitment, not a dramatic promise to never betray yourself again, but a quiet decision to notice faster each time you do and to come back to yourself sooner. Identity is not a fixed object. It is a living relationship with who you are becoming. Underneath all the layers and roles, there is a version of you that has been waiting patiently. Not the perfect you, not the fearless you, just the real you, the one who existed before your mind built a false identity to keep you safe. If something in this video touched that part of you, if a memory surfaced, if a pattern made sense, if you quietly whispered, "This is me," then I want you to do one small thing. Write in the comments, "I am ready to meet who I really am." The moment you name that intention, you are no longer just the person you became. You are the person who is finally coming back to yourself.